Welcome to the Week in Nintendo. We're Good Vibes Gaming. I'm your host, Brandon Miracle, and I'm joined by my co-host, Steve Bowling.
Hi.
We've had a lot of interesting stuff happen in this week with Nintendo, but I think before we get started, we like to talk about the games that we've played over the week. And in this case, one of them happens to be a new game that I spent a good hour playing before we got started, and that is Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. And I'm pleased to report that I'm having a really good time.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those games where, God, is it an old Nintendo quote? But playing is believing. Like it is a really difficult game to make a case for on paper. But once you sit down and you play it, you realize that there is kind of this addictive quality to it.
Yeah, so the first challenge that you're presented with was it called Mush Zoom in Super
Yep.
Mario Brothers? I think I stayed on that for the first 10 minutes that I played the game. I just kept redoing it. Which is funny because like it's the first challenge in the game. There's not that much you can do to improve your time, but I kept not getting the S ranking and it was getting under my skin.
Right. And this is something I said in the preview. I did the exact same thing. I was like, Mush Zoom. And I was like, first mushroom, Mario Brothers 1-1, easy. I know exactly how this works. And then I didn't get an S rank and I was like, oh, hell no. Like I'm going to perfect this. And it's weird how it just kind of sucks you in and you just repeat and repeat and repeat because you know in your heart that you can do better than what you did. And it just kind of gets you into this cycle of trying to shave off these little increments of time each time you go through.
I think the most important part of all of that too is that it's so quick to get back into another run. Um, even if you do a run of one of the longer challenges, and you make a mistake earlier on and you already know the run's dead, you can just hit ZLZR, quit, and then immediately start back up. There's like no delay at all. It's so inviting to just keep trying. I think the most frustrating thing with like more difficult games or challenges like this is the wait period between attempts. Like I don't want to sit through a loading screen. I don't want to sit through, a retry button. Just get me back in there and let me do it again.
Yeah, few things are more frustrating than when you fail at something and then you have this built-in kind of delay to get back to trying it again. This generation in particular, Nintendo's been really good about agility in their games. Like, and I say agility because I don't really know what technical term to use for it, but when I say that, what I mean is like the ease of getting into and out of gameplay experiences within their first-party titles. One of the things that I really loved about Splatoon 3 and something I've complimented it for often is that same kind of feeling of just staying in the moment to moment gameplay as much as possible. Like when you join a match in Splatoon, it takes significantly less time than in Splatoon 2. And when you respawn in Splatoon 3, it takes, you feel like you're only briefly out of the action before you're back in and shooting ink. And I feel like Nintendo World Championships kind of continues this ideology. I think that the Switch being a portable console has really helped Nintendo to kind of hone in their focus on keeping players in the core gameplay loop for as much time as they can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an adult. I have a daughter now, and if I want to get in a couple games, I remember the Wii U era. Everybody remembers how slow that console is.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would like load up a game and I would just be so drained by the time the game actually started that I just turned the system off. And I found that happening a lot in that era.
Yeah, the Wii U era was an interesting time. Coming hot off the heels of the Wii, right? I was obviously one of the folks who like lined up and camped out to get a pre-order for that console. And when the Wii U came out, again, I wasn't in games media at the time, so I just went to GameStop and bought it. And I remember the ill omen at the time being that there was only like 3 people waiting. But when I got my console home, I had sent my then partner out for the day because I was like, hey, I got a new console. I'm going to want to just, be at home and play this thing. And she went out for like 6 hours and I had barely gotten started playing games by the time she got home. Like I had to do
Oh,
system
wow.
updates and the console was just so slow.
Yeah.
And I remember just kind of being there, like hanging out and being like, wow, I'm just spending hours like downloading updates and waiting to get into my games. And when I finally did, I had lost a lot of my enthusiasm for playing the console. I was just like, yay.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. Just the majority of the day getting the Wii was just spent waiting to get to actually play it. Um, so I'm glad that that era is gone. NES edition is the kind of game that I want to see more of from Nintendo. Not like structurally, just get me back in the action as soon as possible. I think Mario is especially bad at that in like New Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe. When you
Oh yeah.
die, it takes so long to just get back because they spit you out of the level, make you manually re-enter it. It's so obnoxious.
Yeah.
Um,
Conversely, Mario Wonders did a great job,
yeah,
of keeping you in that gameplay loop. And again, it speaks to kind of like an evolving ideology, how Nintendo approaches their gameplay development. They know that players don't want to be spat back out to a menu and have to do all these extraneous steps just to reattempt the thing that they were trying to do. And I'm happy to see that on some level, Nintendo is taking these notes from what players want versus what they've been delivering. One of the biggest examples in recent memory I can think of frustrating gameplay loops is in New Horizons, when you still have you have bits of that game that are really, really streamlined, but then portions of it where it's like, why do I have to go back through an entire dialogue tree to do the same thing
oh
over and over
yeah,
and over again, like submitting fossils or, new fish or whatever, or
crafting.
traveling. Yeah, there's a lot of kind of 2001 game design choices that are still present. And I feel like Nintendo is slowly learning, like, oh, hey, maybe people just want to stay in the fun part of the game for as long as possible.
Another like good value point to NES edition that really stands out to me is that literally every little thing you do has some kind of player incentive, some kind of reward. I found that some runs where I knew, that I was doing worse than a previous one, I just finished them anyway. One, because it's practice, but two, because you get coins. You get coins every time you do one of these challenges. And those coins can be used to buy icons. They can be used to buy additional challenges. Um, so there's a lot of value in them. And some of those icons cost a lot of coins. Like, for
Yeah.
example, one challenge might get you 5 coins, but if you want the Bowser icon from Super Mario Brothers 3, you're spending 300 coins or 500 coins on that alone. Um,
Yeah. I don't remember what the highest end is, but I think I saw some during my preview that got into the thousands of coins.
yes,
And
they do.
it is crazy that it's that way. I do want to point out real quick, Nintendo sent us over. Great thing for a second episode of a podcast. They sent us over a copy of NES edition to unbox. We'll have a short on this on the channel later on once I've actually opened it, because it's still sealed right now. It came in right before we started filming, and we'll be giving one of these away. Right, Brandon?
Yeah. If you're in our winner's circle, you will have the opportunity to get yourself a copy of Nintendo World Championships NES edition. So make sure you do that. That's why we're the win, because you win. Um, but yeah, my overall opinion so far of Nintendo World Championship NES edition is very positive. I still question the value proposition just for how much it costs and how much game there is. Like, it's a replayable experience, but I'm finding that I'm getting A ranks a lot just on my first attempts. I'm still like teetering into the harder stuff, so that might change, but I did the legend challenge for Super Mario Brothers. The very last challenge is legend difficulty.
Nice.
And it's just beat the game. The challenge is beat the game as fast as you can. And they give you a little guide showing you some of the warp zones that you should be taking and generally what your route should be. And in my first attempt, I died like 15 times, but the game rewinds you when you die so you can keep going. And despite that, I finished in just under 8 minutes and got an A plus. And
Nice.
I didn't necessarily feel that I deserved that. So I questioned some of the times on some of these rankings. Like, if you're going for an S rank, you need to be basically perfect. So that's fine. but I don't know.
I
I wonder how
I
it'll
do
play out playing
wonder
over time.
I wonder how the difficulty is tuned,
Yeah,
because obviously, there's a screen that's making the rounds on Twitter about this game where it mentions how it acknowledges that many of the people who may pick up this game weren't born when the Nintendo World Championships first occurred in the 80s and 90s. Brandon,
I
you weren't,
I
so
wasn't.
I wonder if it is tuned for a younger generation in terms of people who you and I obviously we have both played all of these games before, whether that's, in my case, because I was around when those were contemporary, or in your case, because you're a true enthusiast and you really enjoy Nintendo games. But I wonder if this is angled towards some of those folks that don't have that level of enthusiasm or that level of interest in older games. And this is a way of saying like, hey, we're going to soften the requirements, because while we know that there are people out there who could beat Mario in 4 minutes, right?
Hmm.
Obviously the broader public is probably not going to get so hardcore about this that they'll reach that point. Um,
I
and
think
speak,
that's
oh yeah,
I think that's even baked into the game design a little bit. I was talking to our friend Logan before the show started, and he mentioned that Nintendo might be training new speedrunners, and I started thinking about that. And yeah, with all these little micro challenges, they are just teaching you how these games work primarily, and then challenging you on specific elements of them. They're making you better at the games, so that if you wanted to go back and play the full versions, like on NSO or whatever, that you might have a better time because you're more well rounded in those experiences.
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Speedrunning is and always has been incredibly popular. Seeing people play any game, at the highest level, just showing off complete mastery of a game is really exciting to watch. I'm a huge fan of Summoning Salt, as I imagine everyone here on YouTube is.
Absolutely.
If you have a YouTube account, you should be subscribed to Summoning Salt. But his videos, I can watch him talk about a single jump in level 4-2 of Mario for an hour, literally, and be enthralled the entire time. And it just speaks to, it's great marketing, right? You watch people play these games, you watch them play at this incredibly high level, but there's a part of you that's like, I bet I could do that. It's wrong. You can't. But there is a part of you that goes, it's just a jump. I can learn how to do it. When it is so much more than that. And I think that this game kind of taps into that feeling a bit, that kind of confidence that people feel in themselves when they see what is ostensibly a simple task and then try to become perfect at it. And I think that that's one of the core things that I love about this game. I'm still compiling my thoughts. I haven't played enough of it to have like really solidified thoughts on the final game. Um, but I do agree that I come back to that question of the value proposition of
Yeah.
whether it should have been like an NSO perk, right? I still think that that would have dramatically changed the narrative around the game, because right now it's one of those games where I'm telling people, like, if you just play it, you'll understand and you'll probably like it a lot more than you think, which seems to be true for you. But I think if it was just one of those free perks, people would have been over the moon excited about this.
Yeah, I could see it having a similar kind of reaction to Tetris 99, and even more so F-Zero 99. Like,
Oh yeah.
John and Daniel, they shout that game from the moon. Um, and yeah, I think that this game would have probably been a bigger splash if it was just a free perk for NSO. So it's a little sad to see that it's getting largely overlooked, because yeah, it's great. Having the experience of overlooking it myself and now playing it and finding a lot of enjoyment out of it. It's a bit of a bummer that I think this one will largely fly under the radar.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that it's one of those games that Nintendo is having a hard time making the case for. I think that especially when you round out this summer, right? We've got this game this month. Now we know that Famicom Detective Club, The Smiling Man, comes literally a month later, and then we have Zelda a month after that. It's likely that people are going to probably save their money for one of those other two titles.
Yeah. Speaking of one of those titles, Emio. Last week we didn't know who Emio was, and this week we might not know who he is still, but we know what Emio the game is, and that is Emio the Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club, the
Hell
third
yes.
entry in the Famicom Detective Club series, the culmination of that story. And I don't know. We talked about this a little bit, and I think a few of our group may have at least considered Famicom Detective Club. Way over my head. Never even once thought about
Man,
it.
that's so funny because you, through some kind of magic, osmosis, planted the seed of it being Famicom Detective Club in my mind. And I wish that I had said it out loud in the last episode because when you just came out swinging saying it's first party, I guarantee it, the first franchise that popped in my mind was Famicom Detective Club. And I do want to call it out. Someone in the comments of the last episode just said it's Famicom Detective Club or something like that, very certainly. You were right, whoever you are. Good call. But yeah, I'm happy that our broad predictions about this were completely right. Nintendo didn't wait long to reveal it. It was first party. Bloober Team is definitely not making it. Those are all things that ended up being true. I'm excited for this. I want the only time that GVG has gotten early review code from Nintendo was for the Famicom Detective Club duology, which Ash and I reviewed together. And that was my first experience with that series because it was the first time it came to the West, and I loved it. I had a great time playing them, and I really can't wait for this one to come out. I'm definitely buying it physical. I hope that this gives Nintendo a reason to put out the first two games on physical Switch carts because they did it in Japan. They just didn't bring them here physical again. So I'm hoping that we get an opportunity to own those physically on the Switch in the US. And I'm hoping that Emio turns out to be, every bit as good. This is an M-rated game, I believe, and the last two were rated
Yes.
T.
Has there ever been a first party Nintendo game that was rated M? I don't actually know offhand.
Gosh, I can't think of another one. I can't. Nintendo published, sure, but Nintendo developed, I don't think so.
That's crazy to me. I mean, for people who aren't familiar with Famicom Detective Club, and I'm kind of one of those people because I bought them when they came out, but I didn't play enough. I'm currently playing The Girl Who Stands Behind right now.
Great game.
And it hooked me right away, way more than The Missing Air did. But I'll still play that after the fact. But for those who don't know, these games at their core are murder mysteries. People die.
Yeah. And
So
there are definitely scenes in which you walk in on a corpse, like there's dead bodies laying on the floor that you have to investigate. It comes very close to the line for an M-rated game already. So that to me means that whatever we see in Emio is going to be that much more disturbing or hardcore. And I like the fact that Sakamoto has teased that the ending is going to leave people really conflicted. I'm very interested to see what that means.
that's my favorite kind of gaming experience when the game ends and I don't know how to feel. Like that means the game's done its job for me in a lot of cases.
Yeah. If you've watched me over the years, you know that I've long been a proponent of sad endings in games. I think that too many games wrap things up nicely at the end and leave you with like a warm, fuzzy, good feeling. I like games where it's morally ambiguous or you don't know how you should feel about something, that you have to de- develop your own thoughts and feelings about the ending of a game and what it means for you. I love that kind of stuff. So I'm happy that Nintendo is allowing Sakamoto to do this, that they're giving him kind of a wide berth to do what he wants with this series, and that they're bringing it back. I mean, it's been 30 years since a new entry.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's I do question like who the target audience for this game is. I've seen some conversations on Twitter about just the nature of the entire reveal. Some people felt like they got duped when Famicom Detective Club got formally announced. I disagree. However, I do think using a live action actor for that initial reveal may have pushed people in the wrong direction, and we might be seeing an adverse effect of that. But you can also make the argument that it is now in front of more people's eyes. So I don't know. I do marketing for a living, so I'm like evaluating this is interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that it is certainly the right way to get as many eyes as you can on the game. You know, we were all talking about it. Every Nintendo channel, a lot of non-Nintendo channels talked about what Nintendo was doing with this. Obviously, people had very different expectations to what this turned out to be. Um, I think it would have been cool to see Nintendo do like a proper survival horror or just straight up horror type of game that was more traditional in nature, right? I think people were expecting Nintendo's take on Resident Evil or something like that.
Yeah.
That would have been a cool thing to see. I'm not going to lie. I would have been very interested in that project. However, I also don't think Nintendo duped anyone. It's not like they said anything about this game. They just gave you a live
100%.
rendition of what Emio was, and I think that if you had revealed it using the art style that the game uses, nobody would have been confused as to what series it was they were teasing.
Yeah, I think there's value in both doing what they did and doing a more traditional reveal, or one that's closer to what the actual game is. Um, I don't know if Nintendo was just trying an experiment just to see what happened, but I'm glad they did because it sparks an interesting conversation. I've seen some people saying, "Oh, Nintendo shouldn't have done this because now people were expecting something else, and that's not managing expectations well." But at the same time, like, you can do something like that, like what they did to drum up hype. But
Yeah.
you also have to have some foresight in how it will be received. And I think maybe there was a slight failure in that department, or it could be entirely intentional, which I think is the more likely route.
Yeah, I would be surprised if these concerns didn't come up when the marketing campaign was being drafted for this. Nintendo, obviously, for those of you that don't know, they have their own internal marketing, but then they work with outside agencies, people who are not part of Nintendo who help facilitate their marketing, right? If you're in the game space like we are and you get codes every now and then from Nintendo or they send you free stuff sometimes, thanks again. um, you don't usually get those directly from a person at Nintendo. You get them from a third party that works with Nintendo. And so I think that, there had to be people in the room, quote unquote, who had access to and consulted on this marketing approach. And I'm sure at some point somebody said like, "Hey, this is very different to what the actual game looks like." There will be people who may be upset by this. Nintendo's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They definitely have people who look over this stuff and shout out what the potential problems might be. But I think in this case, it was probably just a simple matter of this will get people talking. This will get people to look at it, and the potential knock-on effect of people seeing this who don't know what Famicom Detective Club is and are now interested is greater than the amount of people who will see this and get mad that it's just Famicom Detective Club.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where I land. I think this is a net positive, all things considered. There is a third hidden option C that I was considering just a few minutes ago, that perhaps there are live action segments in the game. Like if there are video recordings of the smiling man, and they just use live action footage for that. Yeah, that'd be cool. That's something that Alan Wake does. Alan Wake 2 especially has tons of live action segments that are intermingled with the video game world, and it's a very cool look. So they could be doing that too. So it could literally just be an element of the game. Who knows?
And
I'm just excited that we're getting a new Famicom Detective Club.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I've been puzzling over what would take this from a T to an M, right? Because I don't see Nintendo, like I said, in the previous duology, you see dead bodies, you see a little bit of gore, right? And I don't see Nintendo going really hard in the paint on like viscera and stuff like that, right? And I certainly don't see other things that would net it an M, like domestic abuse, sexual violence, things like that. Nintendo's not going to do that. I just don't feel that those themes will be present in this game. But if you took some of the existing themes in the original Famicom Detective Club games and had them played out by real people, that's an easy M. I could see that being a thing where you get an M rating just because now it's no longer drawings. In some instances, you show real people enacting murders or, acting out murders or whatever. Or you see real people pretending, obviously acting dead. Like,
You're hyping me up now. Like now I'm going to be disappointed if this isn't the case. We're not managing our own expectations
that's
well.
true. That's true. I will say this, and I always cap these things off. Obviously, this is all speculation. Brandon and I don't know anything that you guys don't know.
Right.
However, I always say take whatever Nintendo has revealed and run with that, because anything else is not fact, and it could just be that, this is just maybe it's just it's 2024 sensibilities are a little different than they were in 2021 when they released these remakes, and maybe now they've just earned an M. But I would love to see some of that live action footage be presented in the game. That would be cool.
I'll say this. If that ends up happening, remember that this podcast happened. So another thing that Nintendo revealed kind of out of nowhere yesterday, or was it early this morning? It was one of the two. Was the Switch Joy-Con charger two-way. And this is basically just a little standee that you can charge your Joy-Cons on separately than the Switch. I think you can also use it as a controller, can't you?
It looks like it. So they don't show anybody holding it, but it wouldn't make sense for it not to work that way. Because basically you slide the Joy-Con in, and then you have a USB-C port on the top. It's very similar to the charging grip that has been available since 2017, except without the doggo ears, without the little handles. And it's so funny because that is one of the more popular mods I've seen to the Joy-Con grip, is for people to remove the handles so that it's just a little flat slab that you play with. And I've wanted to do that mod for a while, and now it seems like I won't have to, because I could just buy this in October of 2024, which is a really weird time to bring something like this out.
It sure is. And you have been talking about something on Twitter that I think is probably right on the money with what's going on. We all know the Switch 2 is coming. Nintendo's been talking about it. They even went as far as to say there's not going to be a shortage issue with it, which is a wild thing to claim to me.
Yeah.
But that's besides the point. If the Switch 2 is coming, and like we all think, it'll be bigger, that would pose some issues for the Joy-Cons that currently exist in terms of fitting on the console. So, if you buy a Switch 2, how do you charge Joy-Cons?
Yeah, and I think that that's an interesting thing. I think there's more than just that to it, though. Like I said on Twitter, I think that this also points to a difference in functionality. So people have been saying that the Switch 2 will have magnetic Joy-Con, which, to be fair, they said the same about the Switch 1, which was an early patent that Nintendo didn't do anything with. So I'm not putting stock into anything like that just yet. However, I do firmly believe that if we get the things that are rumored, which is like DLSS, potentially 4K, faster I/O, you need a lot more cooling, which means that the Switch will need to be bigger, assuming it is still a Switch, right? There's the possibility it's not a hybrid console, but I don't think Nintendo would leave that money on the table, especially with Valve and everybody else trying to make their own Switch competitors. It'd be weird for them to vacate a market segment they created. But I think what this means, what this points to, because if the new Joy-Con, right, let's just call them new Joy-Con, if they had all the capabilities, IR, motion, haptics, NFC, every single thing that the original Switch Joy-Con had, just better, then why would you need to keep your old Joy-Con around at all? Nintendo would just happily sell you new ones that do all the same stuff. So I think that this speaks to two things. Like you said, the original Joy-Con just won't attach to the new console because maybe it's bigger. The other bit is that there's some kind of functionality that you need for Switch 1 games, or at least a handful of Switch 1 games, that just doesn't exist on this new unit. And I would be willing to bet, of all the things, it's that IR camera that's on the chopping block.
I was thinking exactly the same thing, because the IR camera is not something that they've taken a lot of advantage of. You can use it in 1-2 Switch. There's that third-party night vision application you can get. So I don't think having the IR camera is something that Nintendo is looking to keep, especially if they don't, iterate on it in any way. That makes a lot of sense. Also, I think just from a convenience standpoint, having Joy-Cons, the version 1 Joy-Cons being able to work on the new system so that you can get into multiplayer right away without having to buy a bunch of new Joy Cons. It's just consumer friendly. It's just smart.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wonder if we're still going to have the paradigm of being able to take controllers off of Nintendo's next platform and hand them off, because one thing I can say is since 2017 I've almost never done that. It's been very
Me
rare that
neither.
I've taken a Joy-Con off and handed it to a buddy and been like, "Play with me." Usually when I meet up with a group of friends, I mean, we're all like-minded people, and so they own Switches as well. They have their own set of controllers. We'll pair their controllers so that they can have a full-fledged experience to one console, and then we'll all play on either Pro controllers or a pair of Joy-Cons each. I don't think it's something that maybe had the effect Nintendo intended for it to have. It was a cool idea, but just one that I very seldom saw people do.
And that can at least be true of like Western territories.
Yeah.
We don't know like from firsthand experience what it's like in Japan. We know from the PSP era that just having your console on you on the train, on the way to work, that was very normal. So I could see that being something that Japan does, but we don't have any hard data that says one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could be something that is still popular. I could see Nintendo doing it also just as a way of continuing to produce like easy special edition consoles, right?
Hmm.
The Switch OLED, the Zelda edition is really just a special dock and special Joy-Cons. And if you can keep producing the same console and just adding like colorful side attachments, that's a cheap way of producing special edition consoles that makes it feel nice. Also, I will say this from a usability standpoint, especially with the issues we've seen with Joy-Cons, lots of people having drift, it is nice to have a core component of the console be modular that you can take off and replace with new ones if they stop
Hmm.
working. If a Switch Lite goes bad, that's that whole thing is going for repair. But if your Joy-Cons go bad, you can pop those off and go get new ones at the store and keep playing, which is something that outside of the multiplayer aspect, I just like the ability to replace the actual core control components of a portable if and when they go bad.
Some people with less high opinions of Nintendo might suggest that the reason they do that is so that they can keep selling you new Joy Cons if they break. Because they never did really fix that drift problem, not fully. I have noticed it's happened less. I personally, and this is not to discount anybody's experience, but personally, I don't think I've had any Joy-Con drift ever, and that might just be because I don't use them very much. That's totally a valid reason. Um,
Same. I'm
but
not a big handheld player. I'm not a big Joy-Con user. But what I will say is the Pro controller, and this is something that's really weird because it doesn't get nearly as much heat, uses the exact same analog stick component as the Joy-Cons. And I've never had stick drift on my Pro controllers. I've never had it on my Joy-Cons. The only thing that I got hit with Joy-Con quality wise was the very first batch had a weird signal attenuation issue, and Nintendo
oh
kind of
yeah.
silently made a revision that fixed that. Like when you were holding them in your hand was enough to ruin the signal. And I remember when I was reviewing the Switch console itself and I was playing Breath of the Wild pre-release, Link would just sometimes run and just wouldn't
Hmm.
stop. And it took me a while to figure out because no one else had one yet. And then I started seeing this and I was like, oh, so I had to send off my original pair of Joy-Con to get that fix, which was, I think, literally just like a piece of foam in there that prevented the antenna from hitting another component. But I mean, yeah, I don't discount that anybody's had them. I hope that whatever Nintendo's cooking up for the next generation includes Hall effect sticks so they can just avoid this repair issue altogether.
Another element I want to kind of laser in on it a little bit more is the fact that this launches in October. Do you
Yes.
think that has any bearing on the potential release timing of the Switch 2 or even the reveal timing of the Switch 2?
I do think it has something to do with reveal timing. So I've long been saying on the previous iteration of the Week in Nintendo over on Patreon was that I feel like Nintendo has to have looked at their 2016 playbook and said, you know what, that worked out. We should just do that again. So part of me thinks that in October, we get the announcement and reveal of the Switch successor, let's call it. That's what Nintendo's calling it. We get the reveal of the Switch successor and we get an announcement of release timing. So I think that they're going to show it off, because the thing is, if I think like a corporation, I think we're moving into the holidays. We've had a string of
Mhm.
great releases over the summer, but we don't have new hardware. And presumably, if you follow the rumors across the entire industry, we already know that there are new Xbox models coming out later this year. And the rumor mill suggests that a PS5 Pro is also coming. So Nintendo may be thinking, okay, our potential consumers have new hardware that they can buy. And we want them to know that while it may not be coming out in the holiday, that we have something around the corner that maybe they should save their cash for that instead of buying either of our competitors' new hardware. So they reveal the Switch 2 or whatever it will be called in October and tell people, March. It'll be coming out in March. So maybe your kids say, I don't want a PlayStation 5 Pro. I don't want that new Series X. I want you to just pre-order me the Switch 2 so that I can get that right when it comes out. And that's, so you still kind of capitalize on that holiday shopping season, even if you don't have hardware to bring out at that time.
Yeah, I think getting ahead of the holiday season is really important. When the original Switch was revealed, it was revealed with that trailer. It was also October, I'm pretty sure.
It was.
Um, and then in January the following year, we got the full Switch presentation, and then 2 months later, the system was out. Nintendo is not big on revealing something and then having you waiting eons and eons for it to come out. So even if this isn't indicative of when this is all going to happen, when it does eventually happen, we're going to get the reveal, and it will be out very, very soon after that, within 6 months.
I agree. And the interesting thing, it's important to note that they said that the Switch 2 will come out in the 2025 fiscal year, which means that you have basically from March, which interesting timing,
Hmm.
to the following March for them to release it. So we know that it will be revealed before then. We know it'll obviously be revealed probably several months in advance of its release.
Yeah.
It will be detailed a couple of months before then, and then it will release. And the earliest they can release it is in March of 2025, because obviously they've nixed out the rest of this calendar year. We know that it's not coming out in the 2024 calendar year. So I don't know if I'm Nintendo and I see I had a playbook that ended up selling me 100 million plus consoles, possibly the best selling console of all time by that point. I don't know that you change that playbook much.
No, and speaking to March and the fiscal year, to me, it just makes a lot of sense to release your console right at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then you have that entire year to drum up sales, and then at the end of that fiscal year, you can shout to your investors, "Look how well we did in our first year with the new system," instead of 9 months, 10 months, 6 months.
Yeah, and one point that I keep drumming on too is, not to say America is the most important country, however, it is the biggest revenue-wise for Nintendo. They sell more games in the US than they do anywhere else. They sell more hardware in the US than they do anywhere else. The biggest gaming population in the world is in the US. And what does the US do in March? Tax returns.
Hmm.
And so if you're a tax-paying adult, the majority of tax-paying workers get their refunds in March. And so suddenly there's a new Nintendo console, you're flush with cash. It's a great time to get people to buy something because the holidays are over. If you've done your taxes, you're hopefully financially recovered from said holidays, and lots of people just spend their tax refund on fun stuff. And so it's a good time to you have money burning a hole in your pocket and nobody else is competing for it. So, Nintendo gets to have the field to themselves with people with suddenly more disposable income than they're used to.
Honestly, the stars are all aligning. I would be very surprised if we're not right, or at least very close, with all of this.
I hope
And
we are.
there's the personal element too, where I just don't want to wait anymore.
Yeah, I really want to know what's coming for this thing. I want to know what it looks like. The rumor mill is so much quieter now than it was 7 years ago. 7 years ago, or yeah, seven, we would have had 8 years ago. That's horrible.
Hmm.
8 years ago, we had so much more info on the Switch than we do on the Switch successor. Nintendo's really tightened down their leaks, and that's good for them And honestly, in one respect, I enjoy that because it means when it comes out, if I don't know anything about it, I'll just be surprised. And I love that. But also, the hype monster in me wants to just see it now.
It doesn't help too that, you brought up 8 years and, we're currently living in the longest Nintendo console cycle of all time. So there's a lot of stuff riding on this reveal. Just I don't want to say we're getting bored because that's not an accurate term. We're getting impatient. It's
Yeah, we
probably a
are.
closer one.
Absolutely. We're definitely getting impatient. This is, it's weird that Nintendo has such a strong lineup this year. Like I said, the summer is packed full of really interesting games. And so I'm not bored with the Switch one, but I am ready and I have been ready for the reveal of something new.
Yeah, me too. But that brings us to our mailbag. If you're part of our Patreon, you can actually submit questions for us to discuss here on the win. And right now, I have one from I think it's Mao. I hope I'm saying that right. That kind of relates to what we've been talking about. We're approaching the end of the Switch One's life proper. It'll probably extend into Switch 2 a little bit. But with the Switch generation winding down, how do y'all feel about it? Is it one of the best Nintendo generations? Right away, my gut instinct or my gut response is yes, it is. And I'm curious what you think, Steve.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I was kind of silently evaluating where it lands in terms of console generations for me. I have the benefit of being the grandfather on this podcast. I'm not really a grandpa yet, but I feel like it when I talk like this. I've been around for every Nintendo generation. I was there from the NES to now. And I would have probably a couple years ago said that the Wii remained my favorite generation. An experimental Nintendo is a fun Nintendo to me. However, I feel that Nintendo has really done a lot with the Switch. The Switch has become less. It's almost transformed how I view a games console, because previously a games console was a device that was something that sat in my home and was very anybody could walk up and use it. But I feel like my Switch is a very personal device to me. It's mine, and my kids have their own. They don't share mine, and I know that not everybody has that privilege to be able to have different Switches for everyone, but I view it the same way I view my phone. Like, it's a device that's very connected to me and something that is very personal to me. And the library on this console, I can play Final Fantasy VII, the original PS1 version, if I want on this thing. I can play some of my favorite old fighting games. I can play big open world adventures. I can play the best Mario Kart ever made. It's just got the best versions of almost everything I enjoy. And so I would have to say that this is not just one of their best, but the best library they've ever had on console, because I can play a lot of their best older games on this as well.
Yeah, and well, you could make the argument that some of the versions of those games aren't their best. A lot of them are. So when you look at not only quantity, or excuse me, when you look at not only quality but also the quantity of what's available on Switch, it's really hard to argue that it that it isn't the best Nintendo generation. There's just so much here for every generation of Nintendo, and you know the amount of variety that you get on the Switch is also massive. And there are third party games as well. Some of them aren't their best versions. I mean, a lot of them aren't their best versions, but they're here and they work. Fortnite is one of the biggest video games of all time, and it's playable on Switch. May not run the best on Switch, but you can play it there. And I don't think that's something that you could say in previous Nintendo generations when it comes to a big third party game like that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Fortnite. You've also got Minecraft, which is absolutely massive. It's not for me, but it's massive and it's there. You've got Skyrim, which is on everything, but it's portable on very few things. Um, you've got a huge collection of third-party games, which is something that most Nintendo consoles, literally most, have struggled with. The Wii didn't have super great third-party games. The Wii U had almost no third-party games. The N64 was bereft of
A
good third-party
graveyard.
content. Yeah, so Nintendo has done a great job not only bringing quality releases from in-house, but also delivering on great third-party support for this thing. Not to mention loads of indies that honestly are best on Switch because they're portable. So yeah, I have to say that this is, if I want to play a Nintendo game of any generation, I'll probably look to see if it's on Switch first and play it there. Even if it is, like you mentioned, not always the best version of it, the fact that I can play it while curled up on the sofa and watching something else on the TV is a huge benefit.
Yeah, in the words of our friend John, the Switch is just very cozy. You can you can bring it with you wherever you want. The level of convenience that the Switch offers for Nintendo's library, and some third parties is basically unmatched. There's really nowhere else better that you can go, and I'm talking from an official standpoint. Uh, so yeah, I for me it's the Switch hands down. If I were to put one behind it, I think it would be a toss up because I'm looking at their handheld generations as well. Now of course they're merged, but it would be very close between the Wii and the 3DS for me. The 3DS library is absolutely incredible, and some of my most favorite games of all time are on 3DS.
Yeah, the Wii and the DS lines. I'm gonna include original DS in this as well because the thing I love about those three platforms is that they enable different ways to play that you can't replicate easily. Skyward Sword HD is cool, but it's better on Wii in my opinion. Like, you can say what you want about the gameplay changes; those are all great quality of life stuff. But when you talk about the actual motion control, I vastly prefer the Wii version. And, playing Metroid Prime on the Wii, I'm actually kind of sad that Metroid Prime 4 obviously won't have Wii remote support because I love playing shooters on the Wii. So, those different styles of gameplay are something that I really value and something that isn't quite captured successfully on current gen hardware. So, yeah, I'd say it'd be a toss up for me, but I think we would edge it out, and that's probably just because again, very much a product that's of its time, and it was at a time for me where I was just obsessive about that console, and I have very fond nostalgic memories of it.
Yeah, that's the case for me as well. The Wii and 3DS are probably the consoles that were the most formative for me in terms of my gaming experiences. The majority of my time spent hanging out with friends and whatnot was playing games on Wii, and that included the GameCube generation as well, since it was backwards compatible. So all of our GameCube games are Wii games, even if they weren't like especially good. Um, just playing multiplayer Wii games in a room with your buddies is it's kind of an unmatched thing for me. I don't know if I'll ever achieve that level of vibe again.
Yeah, I keep thinking how much I would love like a Wii mini a classic Wii mini. I don't know. But, if Nintendo re-released the Wii just with like HD, like an HDMI cable. Why am I struggling to say HDMI today? If they released it with an HDMI cable, 4 Wiimotes, just a modern take on the Wii that had a bunch of pre-installed games, man, that would become a centerpiece in my house so quickly.
Oh, yeah, it would be for me too. I haven't really shown it off to anyone yet because you really only see this side of my room. But that side of my room is my retro game corner. It's not quite put together yet, but I got a TV over there finally. The fun fact: there's a collection of CRTs in my garage for some reason. There's like 4 or 5 in there right now. So
Nice.
I just picked one and brought it in the house. And the one console that's over there right now is the Wii. Like that was the first one that got put over there. So
Nice.
if that doesn't say if that doesn't say it, then nothing else will. And we were talking a little bit about DS as well. It's hard to recapture experiences from that system just because of how unique the hardware is. Same can be said of the Wii. But that brings us to our next mailbag question from Blaker36 asking favorite favorite DS/3DS stylus. Blaker's favorite
S-
is the Lite.
Oh, if you're talking about official styli, I would.
I am, yeah.
Okay, if you're talking official styli, then I would say the DS Lite is the same one for me. The DS Lite is peak Nintendo design. I remember, I was super hyped for the DS. I bought the DS Fat day one. I had quit Target and I had all my quit in your job money from all my vacation that they never let me take, and so I pre-ordered the DS and like everything that came out for it. Um, and I remember the minute the DS Lite got announced, I looked at that DS Fat like it was trash. I was like, I don't like that meme of the kid dropping Woody in the garbage, and he's like, I don't want you anymore. That was me and my DS. And I pre-ordered the DS Lite from Japan so I could get it early. And I worked at Apple at the time, and so it looked just like an Apple product, and I was so thrilled with it. But if I'll take it one step further, there are two other DS styli that I really liked. The original DSi XL, like that big burgundy boy that had the old man stylus. I loved that thing. It was just the size of a pen. And it was so nice to use. I felt like a grandpa using it, but I couldn't deny like it was ergonomically superior. And then on the complete other side of that, and I wish I could remember how I got it, I had a Naruto DS stylus that was a kunai that was impossible to use. But I loved it because I'm a huge Naruto stan, and it was a friggin' kunai from Naruto. Like, how could I not like it?
That sounds both incredible and absolutely awful at the same time.
Yeah, it was a terrible stylus.
It's my answer on this one's a little bit different, and it probably won't even be that popular of a choice, but the original Nintendo 3DS had that little dinky stereoscopic stylus.
I feel you on this.
But I loved it.
It's not a bad stylus. You're not wrong.
It does not feel very quality in the hands. It literally feels like you could snap it in half, but you can't. It's surprisingly sturdy.
I remember just being wowed that it was actually metal. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, I really found the experience of popping it out of the 3DS, extending it, and then holding it. It was just very comfortable. I think I lost my original 3DS stylus at some point, or maybe a friend lost. I don't quite remember.
It was very easy to lose. I lost many of them,
and I was devastated because there's something about that stylus that is just perfect to me. And they've never done a stereoscopic stylus again. They're always those bigger, meatier ones that take up more space in the console. But no, for me, it's that stereoscopic 3DS stylus.
Yeah, it's a really nice one. I agree with every point you made about it. I used it a lot. I lost it too. I don't know how. I didn't even have kids yet, so I can't blame them. But it was definitely, the layer cake 3DS was a really cool design. And I felt that the stylus was one of the cooler things that they did with it. I will say, new 3DS, the small new 3DS is the best design of that generation, but I think that the original layer cake version had the best stylus.
Speaking of the original layer cake 3DS, have you ever gone back to play one after playing like on a new 3DS XL?
Yes, and oh god, it's so bad.
Why is it like that? This is like the Fisher Price of video game consoles. And it's so weird to say that because I loved it when it came out.
Yeah, it's weird because normally the Nintendo has this weird thing that they do where they make their iterative handhelds way better than the previous versions. Whereas other companies, I should just call them out, Sony, like when they introduce a new version of something, it's usually worse. Like the Vita got rid of its OLED screen in its iteration, whereas, the 3DS got smaller and had eye tracking and just was a massive improvement with the new 3DS. The original 3DS is just kind of like, you go back to it and you feel like Nintendo just didn't have this dialed in yet and should have waited an additional year or two. Because playing certain games on that original layer cake 3DS is just painful. Like it is. Ridge Racer drives my eyes crazy when I play it. I can't look at it for more than a few seconds, but on the new 3DS, it's way easier to manage.
For me, it's not even about the 3D, just the form factor of that thing was so square and the edges would dig into my hands, especially in games like Mario Kart 7 or Star Fox 64 3D, where you're trying to get a high score, so you're like really locked in. Um, Oftentimes the pinky on my right hand would just go numb because of the way that thing would dig into my hands. It was terrible.
Oh yeah, and then when you added the Circle Pad Pro to that monstrosity, it was just this massive unwieldy brick. It was just like a weird design for a console, and like you said, sharp corners really didn't make a whole lot of sense.
No.
It's just the industrial design of that thing makes very little sense to me. Great console, it was, and certainly getting glasses free 3D. What was it? 2011, 20. I don't remember when it came out anymore, but it was. I remember the
2010.
first time I opened it up, just being blown away by how cool it was, and they certainly improved on it. But yeah, that at the time it didn't feel. I don't want to call it bad, but it definitely didn't feel as weird as it does going back to it now.
Yeah, every design afterwards was pretty much a complete improvement in every way. But yeah, those are our favorite styluses. Thank you so much for submitting your questions. You can do that if you join our winners circle. Steve, if you want to tell people how to do that.
Yeah, so if you want to head over to patreon.com/gvgaming, you can find out how to join the Winner's Circle for as low as $5 a month. Joining the Winner's Circle gives you exclusive access to our Discord, where we do giveaways like the one we're going to be doing for Nintendo World Championships Collector's Edition, as well as just a bunch of other benefits. You can find them all on the Patreon page, and we'd love it if you checked it out.
That also gets you these episodes on Fridays instead of Saturdays, so if you want to listen early, make sure you join our winner's circle. But that's it for today. We've covered a lot of ground here. The Switch 2's on the horizon. Nintendo World Championships is a good game, and Emio's gonna kill us in our sleep, probably.
I hope not.
But if by some chance Emio does not end our lives before next week, we will see you then. But until then, keep the games good and the vibes greater. Bye now.
Bye.